Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Welcome back to Clicks and Bricks. Today I'm with Rion Westfall from 537 BD, and that stands for Business Development. Rion, how are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful, Ken. Glad to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited to get in here and just uncover some of your depth of knowledge in entrepreneurship. But before we get into that, just in your own words, do you mind explaining to us a little bit about who you are and what entrepreneurship means to you?
Who I am? Well, I'll start off with a story. This was many, many years ago. I was about 6, and my grandfather was a logger. He owned his own company, and we were in the woods, and he looks at me, and he's looking around, and we had a blade. If you're familiar with a blade, a road grader, right? And that road grader, we had to get down off the mountain because the snow was coming, a storm was coming. And we had already had some snow, and there we were in the F-350 service pickup. And he says, Rion, he says, you've got to drive the truck down. And I'm about 6, right? And so he says, here's what we're going to do. He says, I'm going to get in the blade. I'm going to go in front of you. He says, he sets me on the toolbox, and it's a clutch. It's an old diesel, right? And he says, we're just going to release the clutch. It's going to be in second gear. We're just going to release it. And all you have to do is steer it. And he says, if you get into any trouble, just hit the brake. And he shows me which one's the brake pedal, the one in the middle, hit the one in the middle. And he says, otherwise, if you think you're going off the mountain, just turn into the mountain and crash it into the mountain. He says, if anything happens, just don't go off the mountain, go into the mountain. And that's how things started, right? I mean, one of my first responsibilities with him was, hey, wake up at 2 o'clock, about 2 or 3 o'clock. He says, your first responsibility is start the truck. And so I've been around entrepreneurship my entire life. It's in my blood. It's my grandpa. My father's a serial entrepreneur. I've always had it. I'm the oldest of 4 in my family, so I was raised in it. And went from that, a little bit of background, and my love and my passion for the entrepreneurship. I actually went into mechanical engineering and did some stuff with Raytheon Missile Systems, Department of Defense. You get to blow some stuff up, right? When your job is, hey, go shoot this thing, right? And by the way, we have a tank over here that you can do it with. And you're just like, wait, I'm getting paid to do this? We're like, really? And so, you get to do a lot of fun, different things like that. I morphed into the EPCM, engineering, procurement, construction management world. Because I speak both English and Spanish, it opened up the world to me. So I ended up doing construction projects in Mexico. And then I went into international business development. So part of the reason you mentioned the name of my company, Business Development, I handled that internationally for an international firm and created my first company at that point in time. And I was the contractor to handle all of that international business development. So I worked in about 15 different countries, and I'd go into these industrial facilities and do these cold turkey audits, these evaluations. And I'd get to go in and see all different kinds of cultures. I mean, literally, we're talking about, people putting tin pans on their head and carrying stuff to stuff. I mean, just all different kinds of stuff. You'd be surprised what you see when you travel internationally. But yeah, had a great run at doing things like that. But that's where I really gained a lot of different experience that leads to what I'm doing now with the 537 BD, the business development. And that's really about small businesses owning their revenue. So anyways, that's a quick short about me. I've got 4 kids. I live in the Dallas area, North Texas, and enjoying that.
Awesome. I love the phrase, own your revenue. It's always been a key phrase of mine to defend my position. Right. And owning your revenue is a big part of that. So I love that you're saying that, because so many small business owners don't get that. And in a world of, especially with software right now, in a world of drag and drop, WYSIWYG software development builders, having a software company that you don't know what's under the hood is a scary proposition in my mind. But I wildly digressed on that topic. And I want to go back to just a couple things you talked about. You talked about being 6 years old and being in this big diesel pickup truck and pulling the clutch and steering into the hill. And I know a lot of people are thinking, I got at 6 years old, that would paralyze me, or even as an adult, that would paralyze me. And, I'm an old man that's lived a lot of life. And a lot of research in that light to figure out what makes my brain tick the way that it does. And one of the things that I found is dopamine is a huge factor for entrepreneurships, and having a lot of dopamine receptors and a need to get that dopamine is part of what drives us. And, I think that's probably falls on the masculine side of the world for the people that don't understand that. Can you explain to us a little bit about, the feelings that like, it's a traumatic thing, right? But I think as a young boy, I'd be like, "Woo, let's go! This is amazing." But then there's a whole sector of the world that's like, "Oh no!" Like, what do you think about that particular thing? Says, "Man, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life." Versus, "I don't want that. I don't want this. This is not for me."
I look at the sports world. I played a lot of sports and, done outdoors things. And I look at the sports world, the dopamine similar in adrenaline, right? That there's a reason we call them adrenaline junkies, because they're just always out there doing that thing. Like, I would never do that. My life insurance doesn't cover that. And people, they just go after it. But for us as the entrepreneur, that's that rush. That's that fix. I have a phrase. People ask me, "Hey, well, what do you do?" 537BD, own your revenue. Okay, that's a cool phrase. But what do you do? And I tell them, we hunt revenue patterns that scale growth. One of the things that I have found is kind of like, have you ever built one of those jigsaw puzzles? I mean, 1,000 pieces or whatever it is. In business right now, we're at what percent? I think that's the running statistic, and it's going on 97% of all SMBs fail before they hit 5 years. I mean, think about that. I mean, one, how many business owners do you know? And to think that only 3 to 4 of them will actually succeed or still have their business 5 years from now.
And I mean, even more staggering statistic than that is that less than 10% of them will be generational.
Yeah.
Which is why we do, like, we think we're starting these businesses for our children, and they don't want them.
It's they don't want them, or because we don't know how to do it, we're going to take on so much debt, it's going to negatively affect the next generation, right? And I mean, look at it both ways. Hey, I've started 9 companies. I've had great successes. I've had failures, and I'll count blessings and lessons from all of them, right? But as you look at it, I mean, you don't know what you don't know. And to that extent, when I was 6 and I was sitting on Grandpa's lunchbox, I didn't know that death was imminent on one side of the mountain. It didn't dawn on me. It just said, "Okay, Grandpa, I need to do this, and this is what I need to do." Now, obviously, he had great trust in me to do that, but it was expected. And that's just the way it was growing up. So very similarly, as business owners, you talk about this dopamine. I love going on the hunt. I love discovery, right? And every business that I've ever worked in, regardless of what type, whether it's a service, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's on the finance side or the SaaS side, it doesn't matter. Going on the hunt to find the patterns where those patterns are going to bring things together, just like that puzzle piece. It's going to allow you, hey, here's my edges, here's my corners. The dark section, it goes over here, and my light section and my blues go over here, and my yellows go over here. You're starting to organize it, so you're putting that puzzle piece together so that it's becoming an image that you can see and that you can be happy with. Like you said, generational, something that I can leave for my children. Because if you don't, you might as well be, you ever flip that puzzle over, right? They're all the same color. They're cardboard color, and it's impossible to put together. So you got to know how to put those things together. So you're absolutely right. Taking control of that hunting, for me, is that dopamine. And every business owner that I've ever done these exercises with, that's what kicks in, and you see these light bulb moments, and they just come in. It's like, that's that dopamine rush. Like, holy cow, I didn't see it that way, or I didn't recognize this. Wow, I could really, and we just did that in 2 hours, right? Yeah, so 100%.
It's absolutely amazing, and I feel like for humans like us, if you take the hunt away, you destroy us. When everything's coming to us, it's like, I've got to find a bigger, more challenging challenge, and keep pushing, and it's really cool. Now that particular thing alone doesn't really make an entrepreneur, but you said something else, and the way you said it struck me, because it wasn't, "Oh, shucks, Ma, I got to go start the tractor today." It was, I got to go start the tractor every morning. That was my responsibility, and owning those responsibilities as a privilege instead of I have to do this. I think at 6, is a different kind of personality. And I think that that's the kind of personality of enjoying the things that you're working on is wildly important. And I know it's cliche to say, do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. But for a 60-year-old boy starting a tractor, got to be one of the coolest things on the planet. Can you tell us a little bit about, and you coach youth sports as well. So what about the coupling with responsibility with that dopamine really makes a special, I think that makes a special kind of human that has those two things together.
Agreed. 100% agreed. Your question was, how do we take that dopamine and how do we take our passion for what we do? If you look at any SMB, really, it is started, or the entrepreneur starts it because they were good at something.
Or he wanted to see something.
Or yeah, I mean, you had a specific interest or a hobby, whatever it is, you were into that thing. And you thought, hey, instead of doing that thing on behalf of somebody else's business, I'm going to do that thing on behalf of my own. And usually that's the shift to say, hey, I'm going to go start my own business. All right, well, how do I do that? How do I bring that in? Okay, now that I've got that started, now I've got structure set up, now that I've got the legalities pulled together, and I'm, taxes and blah, 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 all the stuff that we don't like about business. Okay, now how am I going to grow this? How am I going to share this passion with the other people, right? Because it's one thing to do something by yourself, but to do it with others, I mean, let's face it, Ken, you and I didn't really know each other until this call. And here we are, we're having a conversation about something that we're both passionate about. And you can feel the energy coming out. And so when we talk about those things that we're passionate about, those dopamine levels, they just rise and they get us excited to say, hey, how can we do more? How can we reach out to more? You were talking about how you're using your tech software right now with these recent episodes to incorporate questions from the people that are out there in the audience. Right. So 100%. How do we just keep growing and growing and going? And I love being on that hunt, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's intoxicating. And I think it's the core of why we do what we do. And you said hobby. And for me, it's quite opposite. I started my businesses because I wanted to do things and I couldn't find people to hire me to do the things that I wanted to do. Right. When I was a kid, I wanted to make videos. I lived in Imperial, Missouri. Like there's no video production company around. So I started my own. And that's how I, got started, was figuring out how to do the things that I wanted to do without having to ask permission. Right. That was a big thing for me. And that's been fruitful for me throughout my life. And I wanted to go back and talk about the failures, right? You had said you started 9, some were success, some were failures. And audience piece, I have way more than 9 under my belt. And like most of them are drastic failures, right? I've got a handful of over $1 million companies. Like there's very few of that things that I start that actually get over that hump. But again, there's nothing wrong with running a $500,000 company either. Right? Those are fun little business units on Main Street. I love them. So awesome, Rion. We're going to go into some questions here. From logging to engineering and 9 startups, how do those early roots shape your mindset around building businesses in 2025?
How do those early roots shape a mindset for building a business in 2025? That shift, 2025, I think, is your key point in there. Things are changing so fast, right? I mean, it just, you wake up literally the next week and what you thought. One of the things I did just last weekend, a friend taught me a little trigger, and this was using some, Chat GPT. And he says, Chat GPT is great. I'm like, great for what? He says, it's a coding machine. That's what it was built as, a coding machine. That's how it initially was built. He says, well, try this. And he gave me some different prompts and I tried something. Next thing I know, I've got my own little widget estimator calculator that's pulling out a bunch of functions and this kind of stuff off of about 20 minutes of work. I've never coded anything in my life. That's not me, right? I mean, there's certain people that have that skill set. I've never done it in my life, but I sat down and said, hey, I'm going to give this a try. And all of a sudden, this prompt, yes, do this, no, change this, do this. And 20 minutes later, I'm plugging it into one of my websites and saying, dang, this is cool, right? This is neat. So I think, to your point, how does it change your mindset? One of the things is we have to be very open to flow. As things happen, we've got to be flexible. We can't just push back simply because we didn't do it that way, or we didn't do it the first time that way. Whether you mentioned, hey, yeah, most of the businesses have been failure. Okay, well, what's going to keep us from failing again? One of the questions that I always ask the people that I work with, and to start with, is, we're familiar with this term niche, right? Hey, what's your niche? What are you going to do? What are you going to? And that's important. It's important you understand that. But the question that I have found that has been most helpful, and to your point about you starting your business because you were in, was it Missouri? You're in the middle of Missouri and you couldn't find somebody to do something. The question I ask is, what problem do you solve that no one else does? And that might be, yes, there might be someone else that does it, but not here in Missouri. There might be, so it could be, you know, based on geography. It can be based on situation or time. And, the truth of it is as we get a new tool, a new AI tool or something like this, all of a sudden we can have a new subset of other problems that come about.
Or
right?
opportunities.
And those problems are opportunities to the entrepreneur, right? It's a problem to everybody else, but we call problems opportunities in the entrepreneurial world. And so in that case, what problem do you solve? That's the opportunity. Great. Here's the opportunity. This is what I solve. And so I think to start, the mindset really has to be foundational in that aspect of knowing what problem you solve, because even though it might be a great idea and it might be good for some, if you're not solving a problem, then it's going to be hard pressed to add real value to someone else.
Yeah. And, I'm way advanced on AI. I went to MIT and, I dive into AI quite deep. One of the problems that I'm having right now is that things are moving so fast that I'm afraid to start a project because next week it's going to be infinitely easier. And I'm scratching my head. I'm like, man, if I don't do my taxes, I'll bet TurboTax has it all AI driven before I get there. And that's, almost this, what I'm seeing today is this almost, it's not paralysis by making a decision. It's almost like it's moving so fast that we don't know what to expect right now.
That piece, we don't know what to expect. I think that's a fear that always gets us to your point. It's a new fear based on the rapid speed of tech advancement, right? Yeah. But entrepreneurship, we're always going to experience a fear. I mean, personally, my wife, I love her, but she never grew up in an entrepreneurial world. Her parents were, in the school system, and they worked in that kind of stuff. So, it was August to May, and then it was 3 months off, and it just round and round and round again. The aspect of entrepreneur, hey, we're going to invest how much? we're going wait, we're not going to make any money for how long? It's a different mindset when you're an entrepreneur and facing those fears. But to your point, I was on a meeting here just with another person. Her business is fractional AI consulting. Like, that's her business. Yeah. So she's saying, hey, to you smaller SMBs, her name's Leanne, I'm going to come in and we'll be your fractional guy. What do you want to do? What do you want to accomplish with it? We're up to speed with all of this stuff. So here, we're going to help you as needed. And so that business would be impossible 2 years ago.
Correct.
Right?
2 years ago, it just dawned, right? Yeah,
5 years ago, not too far ago, it was impossible because it just wasn't a thing. But now, you're absolutely right. It's now a thing.
It's really cool. It's actually, you said about your wife. My wife can't wrap her head around not getting paid an hourly wage. Drives me insane. She's like, well, I need to get paid. I'm like, no, you don't. If you're losing money, if I'm giving you a paycheck for working at the company we own, you're making less money by making it hourly. And it's just so frustrating to try to get that mindset through to other people. I've given up. Either you want to run with us or not. And if you do, we're here for you. But if you can't understand it, I'm just going to say, okay. And, sometimes it's easier to make less money than it is to get somebody to change a mindset.
100%.
Rion, you blend engineering with business strategy. What's one technical insight most entrepreneurs underrate?
A technical insight that most entrepreneurs underrate. I have multiple processes that I go through, and it was all born out of literally the war room. as mentioned, for a decade, I traveled the world. I'd go into these organizations and we'd have a war room. We'd have white and black and green and blue and sticky notes all over the boards to talk about what was found. I think part of it, the not tapping into the individuals within your company. There's a certain way to bring that about. When I talk about own your revenue, you have to bring in a culture around revenue. And to your point, you said something about your wife there, about her mindset of thinking, I have to get an hourly pay, right? If the mindset of our people is that, then we're losing. It is near impossible to actually bring in a revenue culture to any business when that is the sole mindset. And so technically, yes, I have a process. I call it PEPSLIM, PEPSLIM. It's an acronym, and it breaks down every business I ever work with. We break it down into 7 different pieces and 7 different parts. I have yet to date find less, like I said, I mentioned I hunt for revenue patterns. I have yet to date find less than $1 million in any one company for finding those aspects and breaking it down. So, hey, technically, here's people, here's equipment, here's process, and as we go through it, as we break things down, but incorporating the people is a key element to changing that culture, because we can find stuff. I can put stuff on paper and I can make it match and I can put the puzzle there, but it's really the people that are going to frame it. It's the people that are going to expose it. It's the people that are going to bring it about.
Yeah, the human resource is so important, and having everybody on the same page is detrimental to your company. One, I've said it a bunch of times, one bad player inside your company, it doesn't matter how big it is. I guess the bigger your company, the less one person can affect it. But I've seen very, very large organizations kind of fall apart around a key employee.
Cracker Barrel.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. But that's an executive, right? I'm talking about, at the front line, sometimes an employee can really create a toxic environment that just scales so quickly and viral in your company that it's very, very, very challenging when you have a high human resources demand within your company. I'm very happy that I love the people that I work with, but I'm glad that I don't have these, 700's the most I've managed under my belt at a time. And man, I'm so glad to not have that any longer.
It's a different animal.
Yeah.
So true.
Right. You worked in 15 countries. What's the most game-changing thing you learned about scaling across cultures?
The most game-changing thing I've learned about scaling across cultures, I would go back to the training component. When you're dealing with other countries, if you've always lived your life, say, for example, here in the States, and we have a certain way of doing things, and we're very business driven. Not all countries are like that. There's culture, mindsets, what you should do, how long the siesta should be in the middle of the day, whatever the case is, you're going to have a whole flood of how people react to work. And so when it comes time to actually train them, one thing I've noticed is that's also virgin soil. Those individuals haven't experienced what Western society and industrial revolution and things like that have. They haven't experienced those things. I mean, to them, running water and electricity is a glamorous thing. And so depending on where you are in the world, right? And to be able to bring technology, to bring equipment, to bring processes to them, but then to educate them on those, you see a character change in people. And I think it's the same regardless of where you are. When you help people level up 1 level, 2 level, just climb another rung on the ladder, to me, that's one of the most important things you can do is, hey, am I climbing my ladder? Am I actually runging up or not? That's where, hey, we're just talking about our employees. But as a business owner, are you doing the same? Are you actually being challenged by someone? I had a friend of mine, I was just on a call, Sam, and I was doing a little testimonial with him last week because I'd helped him with some things. I said, hey, I want to get a testimonial, put it on my website. And he's like, okay, great. And I asked him one of the questions about the process. And he says, one of the things that I love about you, Rion, he says, you don't judge me. He says, I've taken all of these things and I've told you, hey, I was doing this wrong and I was doing this wrong and I answered your question. But he says, there's been no judgment. And he says, I feel like I can climb. I can do so much more. So very similarly in our businesses, that's the feeling, that's the character we're wanting to exude in people is, hey, let's elevate and let's climb those ladders together.
Yeah. One of the things that I do is I'm a boxing coach, and
Hey.
I love getting kids when they're super young, and we get to see them grow, and I get to teach them to appreciate the rungs along their journey, because I see so many people, that are naturally talented that skip a whole bunch of rungs and they get higher up and they kind of fall, right? Because they didn't spend time understanding each one of those rungs as they were going up their ladder. And it's important to, stop and look at that rung, regardless of what it is. Sometimes it's horrible. Sometimes it's great, right? But understanding where you're at in your business and life is so important. And then understanding that you got to keep climbing that ladder every single day. It's a really cool thing. And then not everybody wants to climb, and then that's okay, right? You let them stay where they're at. But if they're coming to you for coaching, then it's your job to push them up that ladder or pull them or however you've got to do it. But I like that kind of approach. I like it in boxing because I know where they're at when they're 8. I deal with a lot of people in business, like you said, that, have been running a business for 15 years and they don't know what KPIs, key performance indicators, SOPs, standard operating procedures, or Kanban, which is just a workflow. They don't know what these basic things are. Almost, how do you uncover the gaps in an entrepreneur when you're walking into that scenario?
I love that question.
And that's just out I don't have that one here, but it's what it.
I love sports analogies, right? Because there's just so much life lessons in sports. One of the sports that I played was baseball, and when I was playing kind of a wood bat league in high school for the Dodgers, we had one coach. He came up to it. He was a hitting coach, and he came up to me and he just spoke 2 words. He says radial deviation, and I looked at him. I was like, what? What the heck is radial deviation? What? And I just looked around, and then he taught me the lesson, right? And radial deviation is literally simply when you cock your inside wrist, your radial deviating the bat so that you're generating, as you come through, you're generating a lot more percentage, a higher percentage of bat speed. And it made a huge impact on me. Just one simple change of my wrist angle, right? Just my wrist angle. And I know you've got lots of boxing things that you're thinking in your mind, similar to it, right? You just change this, just change a stance, change the way your hips are, change the way whatever it is, those little tiny changes. But what's interesting is you don't see those on yourself. You never do, right? I mean, we've never coached ourselves into betterment. I know myself, I never have. Anytime I've gotten better at something, it's because I had someone else looking at me, someone else pointing things out. Hey, Rion, do this. Hey, Rion, change that. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let's go back. Whatever the case is, it's always from someone else who's speaking, using the ladder, who's been a rung or 2 higher on that note. And so as far as closing the gap, I think the main part of it for an entrepreneur is, one, to say, I'm open to help, right? I mean, I've sat down with entrepreneurs that just, hey, no, I know it. I've done it. This is the way I've always done it. And they're just really closed-minded. If you've got someone that's saying they can do X, Y, Z for you, then okay, I'm open to that conversation. You might get a little bit down that road and realize, hey, that's a scam, because some of those are, right? Or, hey, no, this guy is actually legit. Ken has been boxing for, I don't know how many years you've been boxing, but Ken has been boxing for a very long time. He teaches other people how to do it. Maybe he knows a thing or 2 about it. So maybe I should pay attention. So when you run into those situations, I mean, milk it, right? I mean, use it. I mean, that's what they're there for. They're there to help you. They're not in that position simply because they want to waste their time. They want to help you too. So be open to it and use it. And if you do those things, then you're going to naturally start closing gaps that are around you.
Yeah. And, this concept of coach and business coach is something that I typically kind of take a backseat towards. I'm not a business coach, right? It's not what I do. I'm a boxing coach and I'm a business guy. I could probably be a business coach. But I just want to talk about the dynamic of traditional business versus kind of where we're going with solo entrepreneurship and smaller firms, and where I think coaching might go for business coaching over the next 5 and 10 years. what you're talking about is you can't see yourself, and the historic kind of CEO, president, vice president, they kind of all coached each other on their gaps in that kind of world. But I think that I'm super fortunate to have that in a board of directors that kind of, they can see me, I am definitely the king with no clothes in front of them. So I've got that kind of direction in my life, but not everybody has that. And I think that's really where a business coach kind of fits into a realm really well. If you don't have a CEO, or if you're the CEO and you don't have a president or vice president, those, you're absolutely right. You can't see the picture if, you can't see the frame if you're the picture, right? And there's a lot of detail on the outside of that. So, if you're watching, you're thinking about coaching or getting a coach or anything along those lines, that's kind of my litmus test for it. Do I have somebody in my organization that's already kind of seeing me, but then there's still the company as a whole, that the culture becomes its own internal viewing thing as well. So sometimes you still got to get consultants from the outside. And I'm just ranting now, but those are my thoughts on coaching and needing that.
I think to your point, having someone from the outside is of extremely high value. As long as that individual is, one, capable of doing it, but having someone from the outside, that means you remove the emotional involvement with it, right? They can speak very plainly. Business doesn't care whether you're kind or not kind. Business doesn't care if you've got hair or no hair on top of your head, or a full beard and no beard. It doesn't matter. It doesn't care, but it's a very logical process. And there's certain things to it that it's like the law of gravity. We have to live according to the law of gravity. There's certain laws in business very similarly that we have to live to in order to be successful in business. But having an outside coach that isn't emotionally intertwined and that can call certain other things out like that, sometimes that's of extreme value in businesses, especially when you're trying to tip yourself into a scaling nature. If you're just trying to make the paint look cleaner and nicer on the sign and not really change business, then hey, get yourself some buff. But if you're really trying to grow a business, getting some outside help is definitely a key factor.
Absolutely. It is. It's a huge help. And there's people across the board that can help you with that. And Rion is one of them. And we'll get to how to reach out to Rion here in just a little bit. Rion, what's the first pattern you see when companies get stuck on revenue, and how do you break them out? So the first pattern you see when they're stuck in revenue growth, they just can't figure it out. They're trying really hard, but they can't seem to get the truck on the track.
One of the first patterns that I see is certain clarity. I have a phrase, I call it clarity is power. Mr. Wonderful of Shark Tank, Kevin O'Leary, he always says, clarity is capital. And so very, very similarly, whether you're seeking investment or you're seeking scaling additional revenue, there's certain things that you have to be very, very clear about. And going back to the point about what problem you solve that no one else does, almost every time I ask that question, I get, hey, here's bullet point 1, 2, 5, 7, 10. And 5 minutes later, okay, what is it you do? I still don't know. You gave me this bullet list of things. Being very, very clear with yourself allows you to be clear with your employees, which allows you and them to be very clear with your customers. So one of the other aspects that is very challenging for SMBs, and it's one of the exercises I work on, very detailed. I've got a CR 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. It's a take on a customer roadmap that I've developed. And as we go through those, we just gain immense clarity and we find those patterns. Hey, your patterns are the front end. Because every customer we have, regardless of our business, every customer will go through 6 different points. How do we interact and find them? How do we make the decision to hire? What does the onboarding look like? How do we get fulfillment? How do we get delivery? How do we get them to come back for more or help others come into every customer goes through that in every form of business that exists on the planet. And so as we do this, we have to be very, very clear with ourselves. And the more clear we are, the more power we have, the more capital we have. And the more patterns we actually find in our businesses.
I love it. Clarity is power. My line for that is that there's no peace in limbo.
Yep.
Can't find it. I cannot find peace if I've not made a decision on how I'm moving forward. And by my age, peace is all you're looking for.
It's so very true. So very true.
All right. We're going to jump right into some nitty gritty here. Your own your revenue, which strikes very close to me. You've got that trademarked. I'm a big fan of defending my position in business. If I can't defend my position, I probably don't want to do the business. And I like to defend it in different ways. But it helped some of the companies hit 182% monthly growth. What's the simplest insight behind own your revenue?
Simplest insight behind own your revenue: discipline or distraction. Either you're becoming more disciplined or you are simply distracted. And that goes through every little piece. If you don't have, and you know this, coaching boxing, if you're not helping, if you as the coach, if you're not disciplined and helping that boxer be more disciplined about his skill set, then you're failing as a coach, right? So very similarly here in our businesses, if we're lacking discipline in certain areas, and we all are, I mean, it's just finding which ones, then what is the distraction piece? What are we being distracted by? And oftentimes it's, well, the numbers prove it, 96, 97% fail. That's because most are distracted and not disciplined.
But the distraction's why we started the business, because we have shiny ball syndrome, right? And we want to chase it. And it's what gets us excited is that chase, that hunt, right? So, and how do we prevent ourselves from chasing every shiny ball? It took me a long time to figure this out. And while doing it, I would see other people doing it and like, oh, that's his problem. That's his problem. And I'm over here doing the same exact thing. So what are ways that we can kind of diagnose that in ourselves, that shiny ball syndrome? Because it's discipline. You're right. If once you stop looking at the other shiny balls and you put your discipline on that particular thing, and I think that's what directors and vice presidents are for.
That's right. But like you said, if you're not a medium to large corporation that has that type of resource where you've got $1 million a year in overhead on those C-level people, how do you? And I would go back to process, right? I am a very big fan of process in personal life as well as business life. If you fall out of sync, and let's just talk about your sleeping habits, right? I mean, if you're not getting enough sleep or you're falling asleep at all different odds and times, what's your body going to feel like? It's going to feel like crap, right? I mean, we're going to wake up and we're just going to feel like mush, and I don't want to do this, and I'm not. And if I don't eat right, if I don't have the right diet, if I don't have the right exercise, if I'm not getting my cardiovascular up and moving, I'm going to have issues, struggles. And oftentimes those are unnecessary struggles, right? I mean, they're not needed. They can be solved very, very simply by a known process. Generally, we know that sleep is good for us. We know that exercise is good for us. We know that having dedicated time to meditate and to think and to, say your prayers and read your scriptures, whatever the case is, that is needed for you as an individual. But going back to that disciplined aspect, are you disciplined to do that? In business, there are certain processes. This is why I designed the Own Your Revenue process, is because I would go into these organizations. Sometimes there might be 50 people, sometimes there might be 500. And I would see repeating patterns over and over and over again. And like, okay, well, what is that related to? Is that one related to culture? Is it related to the lack of training? Is it related to, and the answers would vary off widely, but it always drove back to certain fundamental patterns. So to your point, how do we overcome those? If you don't have a process that is designed for challenging your status quo, right, then you're going to be held. And that would be my simplest answer.
Yeah, I agree totally. Is there a book, resource, movie, anything that you recommend for people to read or watch to help them understand that, how to build processes better if they're really struggling with that?
Well, my book isn't yet released, but I'm in the process of writing it. So I would love to say, hey, go to this link and buy this one. Outside of that, then yes, you can talk to me about the Own Your Revenue process. One of the ones, there's actually two that come to mind as I look across my shelf. One is called tribal leadership, and it takes into account the aspect of being tribe. Dave Logan. So Dave Logan, and it talks about the aspect of, in business we have tribes, right? I mean that's in essence what we are. We're a small tribe of people. We're trying to do things. How do we lead a tribe? Another one that I've enjoyed over the past is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And so, that one's another one, because internally, you've also got to realize as an entrepreneur, you're the captain of the team. Not only do you own the team, but you're also the captain of the team. You are the guy on the field making those calls, the quarterback that's telling the wide receiver and running back to do this, and the guard and the tackle. You're the one calling those shots at the same time as you are the owner in the box. And so similarly, we have to know how to sweat with our people, and how to, okay, hey, he needs help, we're struggling over here, let's change formation, right? Let's move you over here, let's we're mismatched, whatever the case is. There's a lot of aspects to it, but to your aspect, finding that process, finding a coach, finding an individual, whether it's through a book, whether it's a reading. And I've got a newsletter where I put out a number of different stuffs for just connection to that point. Hey, think about this, think about this, think about that. But there's those resources available.
Absolutely. My favorite book on process that made me think about processes different is called The Phoenix Project. And I listened to it on audiobook, and it's phenomenal. And it will make you think about process and how to develop them in a different way. It's a novel. It's not tech reading, so it's kind of entertaining to listen to as well. But it changed how I look at building process inside of companies and coming into new teams in a way that I think is fairly profound. And I'm not affiliated with that book at all, but it is. I should be. Anyway, moving forward, Rion, I've had a great time talking with you today. If you could drop one piece of no BS advice into every entrepreneur's brain, what would it be?
One piece of no BS advice into every entrepreneur's brain. Challenge the status quo. As you look at your business, there's times where only you, as the entrepreneur, as the owner, can step back and take a look at it. You mentioned, what are we building it for? Are we building it for our future kids, the future generations? What is the purpose of your business other than obviously making you money? What is the secondary purpose? Where are you wanting to go with it? And how can you challenge the status quo, meaning what's currently being done? How can you really put it through its paces? What are you going to do to challenge, to stress test your own business, to make it more bulletproof, to make it more sound, to make it more streamlined? Right? That is the process of owning your revenue. It's not just sales, it's not just increase what comes in on the front. You're leaking money all the way through the process, and you're losing customers. It's happening, right? And so if we're leaking, just like any boat, we don't sink because of the water that's outside. We sink because of the water that gets on the inside. And so that would be what I would leave.
Awesome. Before we get into our final question, Rion, if somebody wanted to work with you directly, I have another question first that I have to ask, and I didn't ask it, and I'm beside myself. What does 537 stand for?
I didn't find a company name. I've tried about 100 of them, and they were all either taken or trademarked or something like that. So I ended up having to create another one. It actually doesn't stand for anything. So it doesn't have any particular. So 537 was just a unique set of numbers. It actually goes back to the numbers that I and my brothers wore in when we were playing ball. But outside of that, there's no significance in it.
So it still comes from your childhood. You bring it with the numbers on your back. I love it. All right. If somebody wanted to work with you directly, Rion, how would they find you? Where would they reach out? And how would they get started with that process?
Easiest way to reach me, I'm heavy in on LinkedIn. So there's my LinkedIn link will be here as well. You have my website. I'm getting ready to launch a few internal tests that people can take so that they can see exactly somewhat how the Own Your Revenue process looks like. So that's coming here probably next week. But website, LinkedIn profile, direct email, phone call. I mean, my numbers and information are all there.
And 537db.com. We'll throw them in the bottom. And we should probably have you come back on after the book's release with some new insights.
Absolutely.
Just for all that stuff. All right. Rion, we're coming to the part of the show where I like to ask the question from my favorite podcast, The Diary of a CEO, where Stephen has asked each guest to write a question for a next guest. And I bought his deck of cards, and it's been a whole lot of fun. So I'm going to ask you a question from Jesse Lagarde. Do uncomfortable situations bring the best or worst out in you?
Both. Initially, I would say the worst comes out, right? When there is an uncomfortable situation, something happens, you get that knee-jerk reaction. And so those initial reactions are usually when I'm biting my lip, when I'm cussing myself about the way I reacted, and apologizing after the fact. And what I mean by both is because after I do give those uncomfortable situations some time and I start thinking more clear, then I end up becoming better. I find out what lessons to learn from it. But often those lessons are because I reacted, because the situation brought out the not so good Rion on me. And so I would say both.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you on that. I'm both too, but I think where I differ is that really, really uncomfortable situations for most people I handle very well, but sometimes what I would call a normal person would think is just normal everyday life, that becomes uncomfortable to me, and I kind of act in the not most appropriate way. So I think it's both too. It's just where my uncomfortableness lies, right? If it's total chaos, I'm very, very comfortable, but hyperbole just drives me insane because I don't understand it. So there's that in the world. And if you're watching, and join in on the comments, let us know how you take care of uncomfortable situations. You handle them well or bad, or whatever the nuances in your life. We'd love to hear from you. Rion, thank you so much for your time today.
As the phrase goes, there's no growth in a comfort zone.
No, none. Yes. Not everybody's looking for growth, and that's okay if you're not. But if you are, this is the show for you. Rion, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you.
Ken, it's been a pleasure, buddy.
Take care.